Good evening, Chicago, and welcome back to Little City TV. I'm your host, Lisa Reyes, and on behalf of the millions of children and adults living today with autism in our nation, thank you for tuning in and joining in our dialogue this evening. Tonight, we have the honor and the pleasure of hosting Mr. Randy Lewis, the Senior Vice President of Supply Chain and Logistics for Walgreens, to talk about careers and employment opportunities in the autism community. Mr. Lewis is responsible for the design and operation of Walgreens supply chain network, including operations, engineering, IT systems, and inventory management. In addition to imports, Mr. Lewis oversees Walgreens' domestic network of 15 automated distribution centers and one of the United States' largest private fleets to supply its 7,000 stores throughout the United States and Puerto Rico. Mr. Lewis was instrumental in introducing a new concept to Walgreens that would transform the company's distribution centers and employment opportunities. Walgreens' two most recent distribution centers employ an inclusive and integrated workforce composed of 40% of persons with disabilities who are held to the same work standards and earn the same pay as quote-unquote typically abled fellow workers. As a result of the success of serving both shareholders and the community, Walgreens has set a goal of employing 1,000 people with disabilities, approximately 10% of the workforce in its distribution centers by 2010, truly serving as a leading advocate for people with disabilities. Mr. Lewis owns a BBA in accounting, a BA in economics, and an MBA, all from the University of Texas. So thank you very much, Mr. Lewis, for joining us this evening.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Can you please tell us a little bit more about Walgreens' National Disability Initiative? Quite some fascinating facts that we just shared with our viewers tonight.
Well, you did a mouthful at the first of it. Let's see if I can kind of back up a little bit. Part of my responsibility, as you said, is overseeing the building of our network and the design of the DCs, distribution centers across the country. And about 5 years ago, we were building a new series of distribution centers. And we started out, we had worked with some people with disabilities before, but in a typical way. We had some Goodwill folks that came in and did some specialized jobs on the side, and a very typical experience of those. And when I talk to other employers, they say, oh yes, we have people with disabilities, they're doing this task on the side or this task. We had done the same. So our experience had been good. And then we hired a young man with Asperger's in Lehigh Valley Distribution Center who was hired for line work, working real time on the line, doing high speed, high quality work, paid just like any other employee. And that was our first foray into truly inclusion for mainline work, and that worked out very well for us. So we built this new center. We were building this new center, and we said, okay, we want this to be our most efficient, our most modern, our most productive center that we'd ever designed in the chain. And as part of that, we believe that we could employ a large portion of our workforce composed of people with disabilities, people who had never had jobs before. And so I remember when we presented it to the board, we walked in and just, go in the boardroom and everybody's real serious, and we laid out all these reports, and we said, okay, first of all, this is going to be our most productive center. They go, yes, it's great. It's going to be our most cost-effective center. Great. And then, and oh, by the way, a third of the workforce is going to be people that may not have ever had a job before or may not have low possibility of getting a job. And they said, great. So we opened it up, and now we're at 40%. It's been open 3 years now. It's our most productive center we have. It's fulfilled every dream. We've opened another center just a year ago in Hartford. And as a result of that whole experience, we've extended it out to our other 15 centers across the United States and came up with a goal of 1,000 people with disabilities. And we're about 750 now. We got slowed down a little bit.
Well, I look forward to learning a little bit more about it. It looks like we have our first caller on the air. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much for what you're doing for people with disabilities. My question is, how difficult was it to get buy-in from other executives or board members about employing a certain number of individuals with disabilities?
Well, in our case, that's a great question. In as far as other executives, I was fortunate because that was my area of responsibility. Now, as far as my peers and the board, having been through this, most people want it to work. The question is, they want a reason. They're looking for a reason. And in our case, we said, look, we're going to try this. Everybody was telling us 1/3 of the workforce. Gosh, that's a lot. We don't know if anybody's done that. We said if it doesn't work, it'll be our greatest failure ever, and we'll make it work or we'll back off. But we're going to step out and do this. And it's interesting. The people who worked on the project, they had a lot of questions one time. I remember sitting with engineers and they were saying, now, are we intentionally building this building so it helps people with disabilities can do the job differently? Because we were talking about a work surface to raise it up or down with people of different heights. And it was sort of one of those tests, those little tests of crossing the line. And I remember saying, yes. And they said, great. And there was never a question asked. So I think my experience has been is you have to give people permission. They want permission to do it because everybody's going, gosh, because everybody's sort of afraid to take a chance. Mm-hmm. And I think that was our experience. Now the board, I get to work at a great company, and they had enough confidence of experience, and before they let us take that chance. The only thing the board has said to us since then is thank you. So every case is different, but and that's why we're so excited to talk to other employers about this.
It's wonderful. It's great. Looks like we have another caller on the air. Caller, go ahead.
Hi, Lisa. I have a two-part question for Randy. Why do you think more companies don't employ people with disabilities, and what advice would you give to a company that might be hesitant to?
Thank you. Even when we started down this process, one thing that we've discovered in hiring people with disabilities, that we have these invisible walls that we weren't even aware of. My sense is people with disabilities die a death of 1,000 cuts. They may not have access to transportation, may have limited hours they can work. Maybe public transportation maybe have limits around it. They may not be able to get through the interview process, may not be able to get to the online interviews that all of us companies have put out now, and now we have this psychological testing. We'll ask a question like, have you ever lied? My son, who has autism, would say no, and then we would knock him out of the test because obviously everybody lies. We have all these invisible fences that I think we employers don't even are aware we had, and we've had to kind of knock those down one by one. That's one thing. Another thing is I think a lot of employers aren't aware of the community out there, the people with disabilities. A lot of them have given up. You know, when you look at the statistics of how many people with disabilities don't work, it's not that they're knocking down doors, that they've been disappointed so many times. We have a woman who works for us who has cerebral palsy. Mm-hmm. She made a 4-point in college, went to graduate school, had a 4-point, sent out 400 resumes, had 30 interviews, and not a single job offer.
Oh my goodness.
So if you're confronted with that, a lot of people with disabilities give up. And another thing, I think there's a lot of fear built around it. I think there's a lot of what ifs. Certainly we experienced those. People said they want to answer all the questions before they start. And I think there's a big bias, quite frankly, among most people that people with disabilities can't do the job. That's a charity. And one of the things that we had to make clear to everyone is we wanted a sustainable model. We have shareholders. We have to compete. Our customers expect the merchandise to be there at the right price. They don't care how it gets there or who handles it. They have their needs. We have to answer the shareholders. We have to say, this is not a charity, we're a business. We'll hold the same standards. And we started down that road. But there were a lot of what ifs. And if we had settled to have to answer every question, we would have never gotten started. I'll just give you an example. We had a what if. What if the person cleaning the bathroom has a hearing impediment? They can't hear. Let's say it's deaf. The person's deaf. What are we going to do? Because our typical procedure is knock on the door, anybody in there, and go in. So somebody said, well, why don't we roll a tennis ball in? And the person inside the bathroom could roll the tennis ball back. Well, that made a lot of sense. And they said, well, what if they can't reach the tennis ball? Well, maybe we put a hockey stick in the restroom. Then somebody said, well, why don't we use women to clean women's rooms and men to clean men's rooms? But there's 1,000 what ifs that people they get trapped into that. And one thing we learned is we're going to make mistakes, and my gosh, we've made a lot of mistakes, but we correct them and move on. And that would be my advice to employers. But the biggest impediment is, I think, fear.
Looks like we have another caller for Mr. Lewis. Caller, please go ahead. You're on the air.
Yes, Mr. Lewis, first of all, I think it's fantastic what you and Walgreens are doing to provide jobs for people with disabilities. And I know you're aware of how high unemployment is for people with disabilities, and it's how it's through the roof. I know you covered this a little bit, but as a high-level executive, what advice would you give to people with disabilities who are looking for jobs and really have steady employment?
Well, and it's a hard world out there, and especially in this economy. In our case, first of all, don't give up. Don't give up. I do believe the situation is going to get better. I do believe in my heart. I even see it inside our company. I see it in the other companies I talk to. So don't give up. I think knowing the requirements of a job, find out people who are looking, knowing the requirements of the job, and being comfortable that you can do the job. I think that's key. And finding a partner that can find an agency, I think, is very helpful. Advocating for yourself is one thing, and I think that's great. But having a lot of other people help you along, and I don't know, depending on the degree of the disability, some people cannot advocate. My son, who has autism, he can't advocate for himself, so he needs a partner. In our case, in advice to any employer is we go out and find partners. We would have never been successful without great partners. When we picked out our original site, we looked all over the southeast for a good location, and the second criteria is, can we find a good partner who would help us find good employees? A good partner is key. A good partner can be an advocate. They can provide a lot of the service, and they take a lot of the fear that employers have to say, okay, I've come in here, I've studied the job, I know that Lisa can do this job, and we will help her be successful. That's one thing. On our side, what we've done also is we call it transitional work group. Typically, if you go to work in one of our distribution centers, it's different in the stores, but if you come and work in our distribution centers, if Lisa were to come in today, you would have 45 days. Obviously, we wouldn't hire you if we didn't think you'd be successful, but you'd have 45 days to be successful, and then you go on. But let's say that someone else comes in. Let's say Sean. If Sean came in and wanted to work and he has a disability, he would come in and work with what we call a transitional work group. Hopefully he would declare, and he would want to go in the transitional work group, which we would hire him as a temporary. Maybe he'd make a little bit less than a full-time Walgreen employee, but he'd be paid the same as we pay temporary employees. And we would give him longer than 45 days, and we'd give him as long as he needed, as long as he was progressing to be an employee. So that's fair to the other employees, fair to shareholders, and we get great employees out of that. So we've tried a couple of different things, and if advocates come up with those ideas and work with employers and people that advocate for themselves, how can I make employers are trying to get rid of risk. They're worried about risk. How can we take that risk or that fear away from them
And minimize it.
and try to minimize it?
That's great. Great advice. Randy, before we even started this show, I asked you why, obviously Walgreens has experienced quite a bit of success from your National Disability Initiative. Why do you think that's so? Do you have any hypotheses? We don't want to make any generalizations about people with disabilities, but you gave a great explanation.
Why is it successful in what degree? As far as the employees or as far as ourselves?
Well,
why are we so excited?
Last week, James Emmett talked about some bottom financial benefits for corporations, financial benefits, and he said one of them was employee retention and brand loyalty. But can you give me some insight on the employee retention part? Well,
we started down this road. And you hear people talking about there's a great market. People with disabilities is a great market. We didn't start down that road. We started down the road trying to look for a great workforce. That was our intent. We believe that people with disabilities could do the job. We want a great workforce. We have been rewarded many times over by that, and we knew that it would impact people's lives positively. We've had a lot of people. Had a young man, relatively young man. He's probably about 35. Came up to me and said, I have 17 seizures a day. He had epilepsy.
Oh my God.
Never been able to hold down a job. I had a seizure here. We called the 911 the first time. Now everybody kind of just leaves me alone. I wear a hockey helmet, but I'm holding down a job, and he does a great job. What we find out is our retention is better. It's good or better. And the generalizations are, Mark Twain said generalizations are generally true, but not always true. Our retention's better, absenteeism is better, productivity is the same. So here we have a workforce. Now the benefit, why we are so excited about this, is the impact it's had on those without disabilities. It has made, when you go through one of these buildings, and I would invite any employer to come visit, to fly to South Carolina, it's just south of Greenville, about 45 minutes, or go to Hartford. Both these buildings have over 500 people, and 40% have disabilities. And we got all kinds, not just on the autism spectrum. We have all kinds of cognitive disabilities, traumatic brain injury, retardation. We have cerebral palsy. Like I said, it's kind of like a Star Wars bar. We have a very diverse but inclusive group. But there's a sense among everyone of why they're there. And as one thing I never have to do is talk to management about making people successful. Every time I go in one of those buildings, the first story I hear is not how much work we did today, is here's how I've worked with Bob and made him successful. Because they find the management, the most rewarding thing about the job is making their people successful, which is what we hope of all managers. And once they do that, that extends across disability or no disability. And if you come into the lunchroom, and I see this, my experience is most lunchrooms in America are segregated. African Americans sit with African Americans, Hispanics sit with Hispanics. But once you see a person with a disability as a full and worthy person, complete, color of skin, creed, religion means nothing. In those cafeterias, it is chairs moving everywhere and everybody talking, and it's what you hope the world can be. That's why we get so excited about it.
Goosebumps. That's
Come see it.
incredible. That's incredible. So have you had any surprises with any learning experiences you could share with employers?
Well, my biggest surprise is that how people have gotten behind this. Like I said, once you give people permission, our experience is if I had gotten on a microphone to 200,000 employees, which we have, and said, who wants to work on this project, there wouldn't be a stadium in America that would be able to hold the people that wanted to. I was in our Hartford facility, and I was walking through, and we were getting ready to open, and that young man with epilepsy came up to speak to me and told me the story, and I was looking across the way, and there was a woman sitting there, and she looked like she might know me, and I didn't recognize her, and I went up to her, and I introduced myself. She said, oh, you and I have exchanged emails. And I said, really? She said, yes, when you opened up the Anderson DC, I asked if I could get a job there. And I said, and you wrote me back, well, we're not looking for anybody now, but we're getting ready to open another center up in Hartford. She said, so I wrote them. I was working in a Walgreens store. I had been a special ed teacher, had gotten laid off, and I was working as an assistant manager at Walgreens, and I heard about this in the grapevine. And so I wrote them. I came over here and interviewed. I moved my family across the country from Wisconsin to work here, and this is the best job I've ever had. And to hear stories and stories and stories like this, you realize, and I will say to the person that involved in this was the best work of their lives. That's certainly true for me.
So you have people with disabilities and people without disabilities all benefiting, and morale is just
And I would say
high.
the people without disabilities have benefited more. It's made us better parents, it's made us better managers, it's made us better employees, it's made us better citizens. Without a doubt.
It's incredible. Oh my goodness. So how does one go about finding a job at Walgreens?
Well, the easiest way is to go to walgreens.jobs. You don't have to put www, and it has a listing of all the jobs. And find a job that you may be qualified for, and based on where you live, it passes those applications out. And if you cannot fill the application out, as some people cannot, there's a number to call and to fill out an application in a different form. That's one thing we've learned. Not everybody can fill that application online. And looking for, it's with a disability or without disability, sometimes you can go to your local store and ask and look around, what kind of jobs could that person do, could I do, and do they need somebody? And ask and get to know them. Because we've been doing this for a long time, store by store, but not in a coordinated fashion. Now in the centers, distribution centers, we have an HR, we have human resources, and we do all that. In stores, we have not had that support. We have a pilot going on in Dallas that we hope to move across the United States, and that's working with specific partners in a group of 5 stores and bringing in people and getting them trained. And the idea is to employ them there or to move them out into the other stores, or if we can't employ them within Walgreens, to give them a certificate. Said Lisa we trained her, she can do these things, she shows up on time, and to work with other employers to place people.
Oh, that's great.
And that's what we hope to do.
With other employers.
That's what we hope to do.
Beyond Walgreens. That's great. And it looks like we got a call or a text question. What is next on the horizon for Walgreens?
Well, we set a goal of hiring 1,000 in our distribution centers by 2010. We're a little short. We're about 750. We're going to make 1,000, and then we're going to set the goal to be 1,500. 1,500. In our stores now, and we're going to aim for the stars. And if we aim for the stars, we'll hit the moon. In our Dallas pilot, we're trying to hire 1 out of every 10 new hires to have a disability in our stores, and our stores hire lots of people. That's what's next. If we can make that a reality, this is what we want to do. Then we can go to every employer in this country and say, look, we make only 3 cents on the dollar, so we don't make a lot of money. We got a lot of stores, we don't make a lot of money. We don't have a lot of support. If we can do this, why can't you? And oh, by the way, this is the best thing we've ever done. And that's why a lot of people will come to us now. Lowe's has seen this for themselves. Best Buy has come. Clark's Shoes has come. Glaxo. They've come and they're doing this because they see that it's better.
Costco, you mentioned earlier.
Costco, I just talked to their CEO today.
That's great. Another question. Well, tell us how you personally got involved. Why is this important to you? Well,
it's that awareness thing, and I happen to have a son with autism. My son Austin is now 20. He turns 22 tomorrow. He ages out of the school system, so he'll be kind of booted out of the system, so to speak. He's been in the school system since age 3. Now, my son Austin speaks. Half the people with autism, I understand, do not speak.
Some are nonverbal, right?
Nonverbal. So our toast fell on the ground, but we fell butter side up. And Austin speaks, and he speaks a lot about the things he loves over and over. But Austin's been in the school system since age 3, and I've watched, and he's gone up with a group of kids with different disabilities, and I've watched them go through school, and I've come to realize, and I know that every parent out there knows this to be true, as soon as you have a child with a disability, we share all one hope: live one day longer than our child, because we wonder what's going to happen after we're gone. And that's been a tape that's been going on ever since Austin's diagnosis. And so I watch these kids and I realize they're going to be booted out of the system to compete with a group of others who are much better prepared. So what are we going to do? And then knowing, just being in the position I am, being aware and bringing that to others, that's where it came to. So it's just being the right spot at the right time.
You're making a better world for not just your son, but everyone with a disability. So
there's no doubt. It's the $1 million experience for me too.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you very much. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It looks like we're just about out of time. If you could not get your question in to Mr. Lewis, feel free to visit www.littlecity.org/autism and submit your question. There's a little section on there for Little City TV where you can submit your question or watch previous segments. Or you can email us at info@littlecity.org. or call us directly at 847-221-7825. And we'll make sure that Mr. Lewis gets your question and answers you directly. But don't forget to tune in